a biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We do love to get an update on what's happening, that breaking news, some behind-the-scenes insights into what's going on around Israel and more broadly across the Middle East. And Mandy Worby is back with us. Hey, Mandy.
Hello, how are you today?
Doing good.
Excellent.
Hey, let's start with a bit of an update because there's been headlines about the Israeli Defence Force and settlers attacking Christian churches. What have you been gleaning about from those sorts of things from headlines? Yeah.
Well, there's always these kind of headlines, isn't there? And they're always sensational. Just before we get into that, I am going to share some graphic information in a little while about the Druze situation. So I would just recommend that if there's anybody with little ears around, it might be an idea just to sort of scoot them out of the room just for the next 10 minutes or so.
Little ears warnings are important, and that's previewing what we might talk about when we get into the Druze community.
Absolutely. Yes, but let's get into the situation with these the churches. Okay, so look, first of all, I don't know if you remember, probably you should, because Israel was condemned by the entire world after a report went out over a year ago, probably 18 months ago or longer, saying that the IDF had bombed the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, killing 500 people. Because within minutes of that happening, that story went around the world. They hadn't even had time to walk in to count the chairs, let alone count how many people had been killed. But that went all around the world. And then it turned out that the explosion came from an errant rocket fired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists in Gaza. The hospital wasn't hit, but the parking lot was, and less than 20 people killed. Too many people, but less than 20. The news had already gone around the world. Israel was already soundly condemned, even though they were innocent of that crime. Now, this has happened so many times, and the attitude of governments, worse still, I've got to say, the supposedly unbiased, obligated to telling the truth media eat this stuff up and they publish it because they want Israel to be guilty. They're ignoring the fact that Hamas tells lies all the time. So, to the Tabor St. George Church, which is in a Christian village in Samaria, it's northeast of Jerusalem, it was reported that it was burned to the ground by settlers, right? Now, it is true that there was a fire lit, and I just need to point out with regard to the settlers, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny handful of settlers who have had enough of being targeted by their local Palestinians. It happens all the time, and they're fighting back. Now, they're a tiny, tiny group, but the whole world says all settlers are doing this. That is not the truth. But yes, there was a fire lit. And it was actually, grass was lit on a small patch of grass adjacent to the church. There was no fire on the church or in the church, no destruction, not even a singe. The police released a report saying, contrary to misleading reports, no damage was caused to the Church of St. George in Tabor. The fire was limited to an adjacent open area to the holy site. Emergency services received reports from local residents, including both Israelis and one Palestinian caller. So the police then supplied aerial photos to show that there was a tiny patch of grass that was black from the fire and the church was in perfect condition. So that whole story that it was burned to the ground was a lie. Then there was the Catholic Church in Gaza. Now, it was damaged by the IDF when a tank shell inadvertently struck the church roof. It scattered shrapnel into the courtyard. Now, the church was not deliberately targeted by the IDF. It was a tragic mistake, and it's been admitted by the IDF. The church officials were actually inside, keeping about 450 Christians and Muslims safe inside. And they had warned the people, stay inside the church itself to stay safe from the fighting. But 3 people went out into the courtyard where the shrapnel fell, and they were tragically killed. Again, the IDF has confirmed the strike was accidental. It was not intentional. It does not target civilian or religious sites unless they've been used for war or terror. And then under international law, they are no longer protected. They are legitimate military targets. But Israel always sends in notices to say evacuate and get to safety. That's the standard actually for Israeli Defence Forces. And I can tell you, Neil, I remember being in Israel years ago, Because stray rockets and fire, that happens a lot in war. We were leading a tour. We were up on Mount Bental, which overlooks Syria. And it was during the height of the Syrian civil war. And we were looking at the old city of Quneitra. I don't know if you've seen it because you've been to that area, but there's the new city and the old city of Quneitra. The old city is very close to the border. The new city is just slightly off, a little bit further away from the border with Israel. And we could see and hear the explosions going on in Quneitra. And all of a sudden we looked up and there was a boom, boom. And a stray rocket had come from the rebels fighting the Syrian army, come towards Israel, but Iron Dome destroyed it. Okay, a similar thing happened with Turkey during the Syrian civil war. The rebels had fired and it had strayed into Turkey. Erdogan moved his forces right up to the border and was about to drag a whole of NATO in because they'd a stray rocket. It was inadvertent. So it happens in war. This was not deliberate by the IDF.
Interesting, isn't it? When you talk about the settlers and some disputes with Christians there in the Samaria area or West Bank, of course, not everyone likes Christians, and there are going to be some people who are going to target Christians there. And yes, Christians sometimes do fight back. Those sorts of things, we take that for granted, don't we?
They do, absolutely.
And of course, and what strikes me is I'm hearing you talk about the accidental strike on that church roof.
Yeah.
When the IDF makes a mistake, they're usually fairly quick to actually admit that. That it was, that was accidental. Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah,
but as you say, when you're in war, not all of those missiles, not all of those rockets hit their target. Sometimes they go astray and sometimes there is collateral damage.
It's rare with Israel. I'm just going to say it does happen, but it's rare. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about, and you did say little ears warning, some of the things that you've got in your bit of research there on the Syrian Druze community.
That situation has been horrific. This wholesale slaughter of the Druze community in Syria, this is ongoing, catastrophic. Now, I have seen videos which are so bad they cannot be shared on social media. Now, they were very, very quick and like it was over before I could hit the stop button and I saw what I didn't want to see. Some were a bit longer and I stopped. I could not watch them. They were so bad. A Druze hospital saw every one of them inside and out, patient, staff and visitors, all murdered. The footage was absolutely harrowing. The regime's fighters simply murdered everyone and then left carnage in their wake. Whole communities have been killed. Children as young as 5 raped and murdered. A Druze man was literally walking in the street. I saw this video. It was shocking. 2 regime soldiers, or fighters I should call them, walked up and asked if he was Druze. He said, yes, I'm just out to buy a loaf of bread. And the soldier shot him point blank in the face, shot him again once he hit the ground, and then said, who said you could go out to buy bread, and stood over his body laughing at the cameraman. Another Druze man sitting on some steps, a regime fighter just shot him where he sat, just killed him because he was Druze. An entire family of Druze, 16 members, were marched out of their home in single file, each with their hands on the back of the one in front of them, out into the street where they were butchered and their bodies left there. One of them was an American Druze man. His name is Hossam Soraya. He's 35 years old, was actually from Oklahoma, but visiting his family in Syria. Killed because he was Druze. The Druze people are currently experiencing a real genocidal attempt against them by the Syrian regime and nearby Bedouins who started this whole debacle. The only people on earth at the moment, Neil, who are trying to protect them are the Israelis. There has not been a single nation lift a finger to help the Druze, not a single UN delegation of peacekeepers to intervene to keep them safe. There's been no marches, no protests in the streets, no left-wing activists sending peace flotillas with aid to help them. There's been nothing. Israel has gone above and beyond to keep the Druze people safe, and all they have received is unrelenting condemnation by the rest of the world. There are other videos online too, and they show the Druze. Druze are Arab peoples who are waving Druze and Israeli flags. They're screaming their love and gratitude for Israel and welcoming the IDF into their communities for keeping them safe. They're also condemning the rest of the world for not only for their hatred and bigotry against Israel, but their hypocrisy. But this is the reality. I mean, I can't share these videos with our listeners because this is radio, but I could show them to you, Neil. This is the reality on the ground. You will not hear this in mainstream media. And as an added that, remember a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that the United States had actually lifted sanctions off Syria because Syria was supposed to behave like a good boy, join the rest of the world, and even maybe have normalization with Israel. It looks like the Americans are going to reinstitute, I think it was called the Caesar plan or Caesar law or whatever it was. They're going to reinstate their sanctions against Syria because of the bloodbath that's going on at the moment.
But what we understand is the new Syrian regime, even though there are some diplomatic efforts to turn them good, because it's an Islamic regime, anyone who doesn't fit the Islamic profile, whether it's Druze or Alawites and Christians are in there, and they're on the receiving end.
I'll tell you another point is that there's also a Kurdish community, a minority in Syria as well, and they have been in negotiations with the current regime about handing over their weapons so they can just be all normal and peaceful and all sit around and sing Kumbaya and eat falafel together. They're now getting ready. They're now rethinking this whole thing because they're seeing what this regime is doing to other minorities and know they'd be next. That's an issue as well.
It's significant. Hey, a focus back to Israel and Gaza. The humanitarian aid situation, if we've been following any news reports, you might be seeing about humanitarian aid and is enough getting through, all sorts of questions like that. What have you been gleaning here?
Okay, well, I want to read a statement that was issued by Johnny Moore. He is the chairman of the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation. He's an evangelical Christian. And they've been doing an amazing thing to get aid to the Gazans, but to keep Hamas away from it. This was an initiative established by America and Israel. Now, this is what he said. Hamas sees the humanitarian fund as a threat to their control and sovereignty, and they are trying to do everything to prevent us from doing our work, including threats of violence and actual violence, including attacking our workers. Despite this, we operate on the ground every day, and the teams provide large quantities of food to residents in need. 90 million meals so far, and 50 aid trucks per day, not a single one looted. Our team is attacked by Hamas and they operate under difficult conditions and unusual circumstances. We work around the clock to ensure their safety. Currently, our challenge is even greater because the UN and other organisations are not providing aid themselves where they are supposed to. In the last 2 weeks, trucks have been inside the Gaza Strip and are simply stuck there. I warn that all this UN aid is sitting inside the Gaza Strip with all the medicines that will soon expire. The UN is failing to distribute the aid. No one is preventing them from collecting the aid, and they choose not to do so. We beg them to do it or to let us help them distribute the food and aid, and they refuse, even when we ask and have asked. The head of the World Food Programme, Mr. McKeon, was interviewed in CNN and said they are not talking to us. For weeks I have written to them and requested a meeting, and we want to work with them. There is no time for politics. People are dying. They behave completely opposite to caring for people on the ground, and it's all because of politics. And finally, death is increasing there, and we need the UN to bring in food, and we have done everything possible and will do more to help them if only they want, despite all the distortions and false manipulations. The UN is actually preventing the aid. They're feeding half the population. Another half of the population isn't being fed and equipped because the UN won't do it.
Wow, this is an area of prayer, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because all of the backwards and forwards, politicking when it comes to all of the differences of organisations, and even ones you think are neutral, may not be as neutral as you think.
The problem is, Neil, the United Nations has been aiding, abetting, funding and even working with Hamas. And that's the problem, because that's how Hamas funds itself, with all of that aid. They sell the aid that's supposed to be free. They sell it to their own people at exorbitant prices. Now they can't pay their own soldiers, and they're not happy.
That neutrality idea is just a myth.
It is.
Very quickly, Mandy, anything else just on the periphery, any headlines that you've been across?
Well, Iran is promising to continue its nuclear plans. They have said it is precious to us. That's a quote. And they won't talk to America, but apparently Germany, France and UK think that they can work out a plan. They're planning talks with Iran in the future. I mean, does Iran actually have any respect for Germany, France and UK? Not at all. That's just politics. And then again, this was new to me. The US is considering withdrawing from UNESCO. UNESCO is another organisation of the UN because of the UN's constant anti-American and anti-Israel views. This was news to me this morning. Now, if that happened, that would be a blow to the UN because it would mean even less funding from the Americans.
Mandy, always an insightful update. Thank you so much for delivering those thoughts with us today on 2020.
My pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.